this is the Caribbean Outlook 2.0, and it's forging a people-centered approach to sustainable development in the Caribbean post-COVID-19, as you very well said. What are the messages that we want to transmit? First of all, that COVID has, or as I said before, magnified the long-standing structural problems of the Caribbean, such as inequality, debt vulnerability, tourism, and commodity dependence. Secondly, the enormous fiscal costs to mitigate and contain the disease have been tremendous for the Caribbean, and with limited resources that are due to the sudden collapse of sectors such as tourism and declining commodity prices. So the expectation is that debt burden will increase. And we believe, and this is the focus on this outlook, is on resilience planning to make sure that what we do today have a positive repercussion in what happens tomorrow. Source financing for disaster risk reduction, climate change, and other areas will require international cooperation, as we extensively analyzed this morning. But we have to focus on upskilling, upgrading health, education, and addressing citizen security in the Caribbean. Of course, address the knowledge generation, science, technology, and innovation. And we believe very strongly on diversification, industrialization, and upgrading of the tourism sector as a key factors to improve trade performance. And of course, harnessing the potential of integration and the ocean economy. The impact of COVID in the Caribbean has been tremendous. Domestic challenges, revenue, income losses, dropping investment, increasing unemployment, increasing indigence, poverty, extreme poverty and poverty, failure of a small and medium-sized businesses, challenges to the financial system, and the closure of schools and children to lose probably 1 year of their formation. And externally, we have faced, or you have faced, basically, the shutdown of air and cruise travel, causing an immense blow to the tourism sector, stress in the supply chains, agriculture, construction, hotels, restaurants, sharp contraction in larger economies, of course, and that has had a repercussion in the Caribbean economies. Contraction of FDI, foreign direct investment, and remittances, disruption in transport and global supply, and risk aversion from external investors and financial turbulence, and of course, the restriction in foreign exchange availability. This same impact across the Caribbean has been so severe that we project a decline of -6.9, excluding Guyana, lower than emerging and developing countries, we have to say, because in the region, we will have a decline of 9.1 for the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean. So the Caribbean is dropping a little bit less, but still, very importantly, the fiscal deficits were in 2019 were of -2.7 of GDP, and it's expected to expand. Unemployment rates might increase, although you were having a very good performance in the last 5 years, and high debt levels. This is probably the most important problem that we want to we want you to know that ECLAC is fully engaged in trying to get a debt sustainability and a debt, I would say, a diminishing of the debt and a haircut for many of the Caribbean countries. So, because we understand the public debt versus the fiscal balance is really punishing your economies enormously. So, mitigating the impact of COVID-19 in the Caribbean is already between 0.5 to 5% of GDP, with the exception of Barbados, which is investing 19.2%. And 8 of these countries fall beneath the ECLAC average of 3.9, but still, it's a big effort. But we understand that this will require financial assistance from international donors. It is inadequate today, the international assistance that the Caribbean is receiving, and only Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and Bahamas have been able to access $190 million in loans, but the rest of the countries have not been able even to access 43 million. So there is a need, and also the grants, the donations to the region have not been over 40 million. So again, we have a problem. So, and this investment, this fiscal cost has been devoted to stimulus, fiscal stimulus for payroll support, for grants to businesses, unemployment benefits, public assistance for those in the informal sector, which in the Caribbean is growing, other forms of relief on utility bills. So the effort is huge, and the cost of these measures on employment and social protection has been so far estimated at $1.2 billion. The Caribbean is let's say, minus 40% has been the decline in exports in relation to GDP. Can you see this? Minus 40%. And of course, the other parts of the region have also been very hit, but the Caribbean is the most hardly hit. And in terms of GDP and employment, you can see how much the region is going to be impacted in terms of GDP points that are going to go down, and in terms of employment. And energy, as we said this morning also, we have seen that the two countries, Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, will have a severe impact also in their decline of energy sector, let's say FDI and employment and many of the revenues that they were getting before the crisis. And also because the commodity prices have gone down. Intra-regional trade, which is an issue that we really want to underline, is that the bloc that was the most, I would say, negative in terms of the change in exports is CARICOM. It has fallen minus 31%. And we believe this is something that the region has to look into carefully, because this is I mean, when we see January to May, the fall, the trade ratio measured by exports within the integration bloc has fallen dramatically. We have, of course, analyzed with many of the countries. We have put together a COVID observatory, and some of the short-term urgent measures are, of course, this temporary income support to workers and labor training to support the business survival and improve digital skills for the future, to adopt protocols to prevent contagion and ensure travelers' trust, which is very important for the Caribbean at this juncture, and to strengthen public-private clusters to facilitate tourism value chain upgrading, to diversify tourism activity and promote and reduce the gender gaps, because women have been the most hardly hit. Now, you, Prime Minister Chastanet, have been very active in reinforcing sub-regional cooperation to make sure that cross-border transport networks are as open as possible, including digital solutions, to create a multi-country and multi-stakeholder crisis coordinating teams, develop joint guidelines and protocols to restore trust in travel and tourism, and to foster the exchange of good practices among the countries of the Caribbean. Now, this Caribbean outlook is more oriented towards how to build resilience for the medium term. And this is, we first believe that a very important priority is to address the declining trend in productivity. Productivity in the English Caribbean is very low and has been going down since 2014 in comparison, let's say, with other lower middle income countries or upper middle income countries of the world and the region. So we believe this is something that needs to be looked into carefully. Secondly, how to close the gaps in broadband access and digital services. We have found that this is essential. It's not a luxury anymore. We need active mobile broadband, and we need also to improve the use of internet. We know that there are many countries of the region that really need to fill in this gap. And in fact, we are suggesting a digital basket to try to confront this problem of digital access, or access to internet on the one hand, and to broadband of good quality on the other hand. We need also to close the gender inequalities, particularly in the labor market. Here is the difference between women and men, and we can see how much the unemployment rate is hitting much harder to women than to men. And this is something that we really are worried about. We need to diversify trade and expand international reserves. This is essential because otherwise, how is the Caribbean going to get I would say, the money, the foreign currency, to deal with the current account balance, and also, of course, with the tremendous expenses and fiscal needs that you are trying to support. And you can see how much the current account balance has been going down. And of course, the net international reserves are also very heterogeneous in the region. And that's why we are really looking for more liquidity measures for the Caribbean. Diversification and expansion of trade, both in goods and services, is a way of moving up the value chain in a meaningful way. So we have divided here the technological intensity of exports for the Caribbean, the composition of service trade exports for the Caribbean. And we can see, of course, much of this is dependent on travel. We can see that. But there's also some sort of diversification where we can really look into and see how best this could be supported in the future. Food and agriculture. You, Minister Gonzalez, this morning said something about that, because 80 to 90% of all the food consumed in the region is coming from imports, extra-regional imports, and North America being the main supplier. And main food import categories are food preparation, wheat, rice, chicken, maize, soya, sugar, and palm. So, and the imports in 2018 figures, let's say, amounted to $3.7 billion. It's a lot of money. So I think there's a need to develop domestic and regional markets for food, not only for the internal consumption, but also for the tourism that has to be looked into, we believe. What are the potential areas that can be benefited from upgrading? First of all, of course, to address the digital divide for millennials, and also for the creative industries that this morning were also so very much underlined, to invest in frontier technologies, big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, to invest in domestic and regional tourism market, supplying more agriculture inputs to the tourism sector, as we said before, and of course, look into how the regional tourism space that was used for the Cricket World Cup in 2007, and also how to brand and market the region, highlighting the minimum impact for the pandemic, which is true. The Caribbean has done a great job in that regard. Investing abroad in hotel niches to develop interregional tourism market, invest in domestic and regional market as well, and of course, to develop we feel there are considerable opportunities for innovation in the use of oceans, basically a viable aquaculture sector to restore the marine ecosystems, and also in the use of oceans, which requires collective action. The Caribbean urgently needs to gain ground in the social sector, and that is to upgrade the schooling system at all levels and to prepare the capabilities of the young people for problem solving and innovation. Teaching should be a major profession to address the quality of education. I heard this morning, and I was so pleased to hear that. We need to invest in ICT, in information and communication technology, and other infrastructure to include all communities, to build the capabilities of the workers' productivity and improve social services. Programs to support women and youth, particularly due to the violence rate in the Caribbean, and particularly boys, I have to say, because they are also the ones who are suffering the most. Provide balanced nutrition to address childhood obesity, which is a risk factor for many of the countries, and to promote universal social protection systems, which I think is a must after these pandemics. We understand that. Financing for development, I'm not going to tire you with our 5 proposals, but here is something that we believe: how to align finance with longer-term goals, resilience building, climate change, economic development, and the debt crisis, of course. How to negotiate collectively. I think your voices collectively can really get better conditions for access to international finance and concessional sources. Debt sustainability and the Caribbean Resilience Fund for us is a very important, as you know, we are advocates of these proposals. Innovative instruments such as blue bonds, green bonds, diaspora bonds, hurricane clauses, and also how to create local capital, attract finance from local savings, and remove barriers for innovation to enhance private sector participation. So we need to move towards a regenerative development model, deepening regional integration, as we saw. We need to foster intra-regional trade, to strengthen production linkages, to relocate strategies, facilitate freer movement of persons, promote greater resilience in production networks, to establish a pan-Caribbean ferry services for transport, to foster and increase intra-regional, intra-CARICOM investment facility. These are the key development priorities that the Caribbean Outlook looks into: food security, economic diversification, and industrialization for green investment, expand the broadband and the internet access as platforms for education and communication, to strengthen the risk assessment and disaster management, enhance social protection, and strengthen health infrastructure. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that you will find this Caribbean Outlook interesting and important for all of you.